So The Weeknd has a new movie coming out this weekend called Hurry Up Tomorrow, which is loosely based on his album. I think he said the album came first and then the movie just came naturally after that. But he brings on Trey Edward Shultz as the director and one of the writers, alongside Reza Fahim and The Weeknd, who are also co-writers on this movie. Reza was one of the co-creators for The Idol, which I only was able to last about an episode of that show, and then I just immediately jumped off of it. But I have been really interested in this movie because it looked like it was going to be The Weeknd's take on Misery, where you have this deranged fan that is obsessed with him and just kidnapped him and just won't let him go, mix in with a little bit more of the psychological thriller aspect of this movie. And so on that aspect, I was a little bit more interested, but knowing that this was one of the co-creators of The Idol that wrote this movie with The Weeknd and Trey Edward Shultz, I didn't have sky high expectations. I just had middle of the road expectations. Hopefully Trey Edward Shultz would be able to have a little bit more style to this movie and make this movie pop, even if the movie was terrible. And in some cases, I basically got what I paid for. This movie is exactly what you think it's going to expect. If you are a die-hard fan of The Weeknd, you're going to eat this movie up immediately, and anybody that criticizes this movie for being a movie, you're probably going to just tell them that this movie was not made for them. And I am a somewhat fan of The Weeknd. I'm not a hardcore fan. I do like some of his music, but some of it doesn't really work for me. I just really stick to a little bit more of the mainstream music. And so I was really hoping that even though his acting in Uncut Gems and in The Idol weren't the best, I was really hoping that he would be able to channel that a little bit more in here in a full-length film, and he doesn't really do that. This movie is not great. I was struggling to find something positive in this movie as a whole, and I was really hoping that I would come out really surprised by this movie, but it was just exactly what I expected this movie to be. The first 10 to 15 minutes of this movie literally gave me the biggest motion sickness I have ever felt. And those first 10 to 15 minutes is an epileptic's worst nightmare because you have a lot of strobing lights and they do give you that warning as soon as the movie begins. But it is so excessive that it was just starting to bug me so much. It was almost giving me a headache. And the way that Trey Edward Shultz directs this movie in the first two acts of this movie, there is nothing in here that makes it feel stylized or anything unique. There is a trick that he uses with the camera where he felt like he put the camera on a tripod or on a chair and he just spun that motherfucker until somebody told him, hey, you do know we're making a movie, right? That just gave me the biggest motion sickness, and if that happened one more time, I was literally going to walk out of this movie because it was just giving me the biggest headache in here. You have Jenna Ortega, who plays kind of an obsessed fan, kind of not. You don't really know who she is, except you know exactly what kind of character she's going. If you were going to go to Vegas and place bets on what character she is going to be playing, if you put money that she was going to be playing a character with mommy issues, congratulations, you just won the jackpot because that's exactly the character that she plays, and there's really nothing more to her. And then you also have Barry Keoghan, who plays his manager, and so he's kind of riling up the Weeknd while the Weeknd is kind of struggling with his demons, with his relationship, and so he's kind of putting a lot of more pressure on the Weeknd, trying to get out there to perform even if his voice is about to give out. And from what I've heard, that happened at a concert. I'm not too sure because I don't really keep up with a lot of the Weeknd stuff, so from what I hear, that is something that he experienced. And so you go through this entire movie, and the dialogue in this movie is just dreadfully awful from beginning to end. You kind of don't even know exactly what this movie is even supposed to be about. You kind of get the gist of the idea of what this movie is supposed to be. There are some psychological themes in here that, even though they are in here, you still need to make a great movie around it, and they just really don't. It feels like they wrote half of the movie, went to shoot The Idol, and then came back, read the script, and said, you know, we pitched this movie as a psychological thriller. Are we ever going to get to that point? And when they do, it just feels so thrown in here. And that one thing that I was going for, where you have Jenna Ortega semi-kidnapping The Weeknd, not letting him go, tying him up to the bed, her channeling her inner Kathy Bates in Misery, that is just the last 30 minutes of this movie. It feels like they just threw it in there just to have that thriller aspect, and nothing that happens in the last 30 minutes is thrilling or captivating. It feels like it just was thrown in there and they didn't even know exactly what to do with it, and it just ends so rapidly. This movie is about an hour 45 minutes, an hour 50, and it felt longer than that. You kind of get the gist of what the Weeknd wanted this movie to be, but there's no style, it's just substance, and it's just extremely boring. I was bored halfway through this movie and I was contemplating about walking out, but mama didn't raise no quitter, so I just stuck it out, and I just did not like this movie. Halfway through this movie, I was just starting to fall asleep, and I wanted to like this movie, especially with me being a semi fan of The Weeknd. I was really hoping that this would be up my alley, something that would entertain me and making me appreciate his music just a little bit more. Which I kind of do, but not to the extent that they probably wanted me to feel that. But overall, if you're a big fan of The Weeknd, you're going to eat this movie up and you're going to absolutely love it. But if you're not a fan of The Weeknd, or if you're a semi fan of The Weeknd, you're probably going to be bored shitless like I was, and you might want to check it out on streaming. But if the trailers didn't really entice you enough to check this movie out, I would just say skip it, because there's nothing in here that is redeemable. It was hard for me to find something redeemable about this movie. If there's one thing that's redeemable about this movie, the fact that we have Jenna Ortega in here to look at, that's probably going to gain 1 point for me. But those are my thoughts on Hurry Up Tomorrow. Have you guys checked it out? Are you planning on checking this movie out? Go ahead and drop your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll catch you guys for the next video.